"You'll need to return to your seat," the flight attendant said, her smile a tight, dismissive line as she blocked the lavatory door. Dr. Jasmine Washington, a neurosurgeon fresh off a 36-hour shift, felt the sting of public humiliation. She was being denied a basic human need. What the smug attendant didn't know was that her blatant discrimination was being recorded by a tech CEO across the aisle. Nor did she realize the quiet man seated next to Jasmine was an incognito member of the airline's board of directors, witnessing a violation that would soon ignite a federal investigation. Dr. Jasmine Washington checked her watch as she settled into a first-class seat on Horizon Airlines Flight 257. In exactly 9 hours, she was scheduled to deliver the keynote presentation at the National Neurosurgical Conference in Atlanta. After working a grueling 36-hour shift that culminated in saving a 10-year-old boy with a traumatic brain injury, she was beyond exhausted. "Can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" Ma'am Flight Attendant Brenda Mitchell hovered beside Jasmine's seat, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Just water, please," Jasmine replied, already pulling out her presentation notes. The hospital had sprung for the first-class ticket, a rare luxury that would allow her to refine her speech during the 3-hour flight. As Brenda returned with the water, she was all warmth and efficiency for the passenger across the aisle. "Mr. Bennett, so good to see you again. Your usual scotch on the rocks once we're airborne." Kyle Bennett, a tall white man in his 40s, dressed in a Silicon Valley uniform of expensive casual wear, gave a friendly nod. "You know me too well, Brenda." Jasmine noticed the difference in treatment, but dismissed it from her mind. As one of only 8 black female neurosurgeons in the country, she'd learned to pick her battles. Today, she needed to focus on her presentation. As the cabin filled, Samuel Thompson, an older black man in an impeccably tailored suit, took the seat beside her. They exchanged polite nods. Jasmine returned to her notes, highlighting key points about the innovative surgical technique she'd pioneered for pediatric trauma cases. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Horizon Airlines Flight 257 to Atlanta," came the captain's voice over the intercom. "I'm Captain Lawrence Davis, and we're expecting a smooth flight today. We'll be cruising at 36,000 FT, and our flight time is approximately 3 hours. The weather in Atlanta is sunny and 78 degrees. We'll be turning off the seatbelt sign shortly after reaching our cruising altitude, and you'll be free to move about the cabin." The plane taxied and took off without incident. True to the captain's word, the seatbelt sign turned off about 20 minutes into the flight. Jasmine continued working occasionally, sipping her water as the flight attendants began their service. 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine realized she needed to use the restroom. She'd been so engrossed in her work that she'd ignored the building pressure in her bladder. Now it was becoming difficult to concentrate. She watched as several passengers, including Kyle Bennett and a woman named Amber Collins from a few rows ahead, used the first-class lavatory without incident. Jasmine waited for a lull in activity before gathering her things to get up. The memory of a similar flight 6 months ago flashed through her mind, how a different flight attendant had questioned her presence in first class and asked to see her boarding pass when she'd gotten up to use the restroom. No one else had been asked. She took a deep breath and stood making her way toward the lavatory at the front of the first-class cabin. The head flight attendant, Gregory Phillips, was chatting with Brenda near the galley. Both glanced at her as she approached. The lavatory was unoccupied, its door ajar, and that the vacant sign clearly visible. Jasmine had just reached for the door when she felt a hand on her arm. "Excuse me," Brenda said, stepping between Jasmine and the bathroom door. "You'll need to return to your seat. The captain has turned on the seatbelt sign." Jasmine looked up at the indicators. The seatbelt sign was definitely off. "I'm sorry, but the sign is off," she said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "I just need to use the restroom quickly." Brenda's smile tightened. "I'm afraid I must insist. We're expecting turbulence." Jasmine glanced back down the aisle, where at least 3 other passengers, all white, were up and moving around freely. No one was stopping them. "I understand, but I really need to use the bathroom." Jasmine persisted. "I've been waiting for over an hour, and I see other passengers are up and moving around." That's when Gregory Phillips stepped forward, his tall frame imposing, as he moved to stand beside Brenda. "Is there a problem here? This passenger is refusing to return to her seat despite the safety protocol," Brenda said before Jasmine could speak. "Sir, there's no seatbelt sign on—" Jasmine explained, frustration creeping into her voice despite her best efforts. "I'm a doctor, and I've been holding it for medical reasons. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important." Gregory's face remained impassive. "Ma'am, we have security protocols that may not be visible to passengers. I need you to return to your seat immediately." From the corner of her eye, Jasmine noticed Kyle Bennett had taken out his phone and was holding it at an angle that suggested he might be recording the interaction. Most of the other passengers were pretending not to notice, finding sudden interest in their magazines or screens. "Is there a reason you're preventing this woman from using the restroom when others have been using it freely?" Samuel Thompson had appeared beside Jasmine, his deep voice calm but authoritative. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," Gregory said dismissively. "I believe it does," Samuel replied. "As a frequent flyer who has been observing that other passengers have been using this very facility without comment for the past hour. So, ma'am, if you don't return to your seats, immediately we'll be forced to take further action," Gregory warned. "This is your final notice before I alert the captain about unruly passengers." Jasmine felt her face burning with humiliation. Every eye in first class was now on her. She'd faced discrimination before. Being mistaken for a nurse or janitor at the hospital, despite her white coat and credentials being followed in high-end stores, having people clutch their bags tighter when she entered elevators. But this was different. This was a basic human need being denied in public. "Fine," she said quietly, turning away from the smug expressions of the flight attendants. As she walked back to her seat, legs pressed tightly together in discomfort, she heard Brenda's artificially sweet voice behind her. "The lavatory is available now. Ms. Collins?" Jasmine sank into her seat, feeling Samuel's sympathetic gaze. "This isn't right," he murmured. "It's not—" She agreed, her voice barely audible as she watched Amber Collins stroll past to use the exact same bathroom she'd just been denied access to. Jasmine sat rigidly in her seat, trying to focus on anything except her increasingly urgent physical discomfort. Her medical training told her that holding urine for extended periods could lead to urinary tract infections or even kidney issues, especially given her exhausted state and slight dehydration from her long hospital shift. She watched as Amber Collins returned from the bathroom, giving a friendly wave to Brenda as she passed. The blatant double standard made Jasmine's blood boil, but she maintained her composure. As her mother had always told her, in this world, you'll have to be twice as good to get half as much. And when they're unfair, you document everything and fight smart, not loud. Taking her mother's advice to heart, Jasmine pulled out her phone and began making notes of what had transpired, times, names, specific statements, anything that might be relevant later. Samuel Thompson noticed and gave her an approving nod. "You mind if I share some advice?" he asked in a low voice. "Not at all," Jasmine replied. "Get their employee numbers. Those are trackable in the system in ways that names alone aren't." Jasmine nodded gratefully, adding this to her notes. Meanwhile, her physical discomfort was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. She checked her watch. 30 minutes had passed since she'd been denied bathroom access. "Excuse me," she called politely as Brenda passed by their row. Brenda paused, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Yes, I really need to use the restroom now. It's been half an hour since I last asked, and it's becoming a medical issue." Brenda's expression hardened. "The seatbelt sign is on now." Jasmine looked up. The sign had indeed been turned on, though there was no turbulence and hadn't been any announcement. "I understand, but this is urgent," Jasmine insisted. "I've been waiting for hours, and it's becoming a health concern." "Rules are rules," Brenda replied. "You'll have to wait until the captain turns the sign off." "When will that be? I can't say." "Whenever the captain decides it's safe." As Brenda walked away, Jasmine noticed Kyle Bennett watching the interaction intently, his phone still angled subtly in their direction. Samuel Thompson cleared his throat. "Excuse me, miss," he called to Brenda. "I couldn't help but notice that several passengers used the facilities earlier without any issue. Is there a reason Dr. Washington here is being treated differently? Brenda's smile vanished completely. Sir, are you suggesting something? I'm not suggesting. I'm stating plainly that I've observed discriminatory treatment, Samuel replied evenly, and I believe other passengers have noticed it too. Gregory appeared as if summoned. Is there a problem here? Yes, Samuel said before Brenda could respond. This lady is being denied a basic human necessity while others are granted access. I'm curious about the discrepancy. Gregory's face darkened. Sir, if you're implying our crew is discriminating, I suggest you think very carefully about making such serious accusations. We're simply following protocol for passenger safety. What protocol specifically allows some passengers bathroom access while denying others? Jasmine asked, her professional demeanor still intact despite her growing distress. Ma'am, if you continue to question crew instructions, I'll have security personnel meet this aircraft when we land. Gregory threatened, his voice low enough that only those in the immediate vicinity could hear. Are you threatening me for asking to use the bathroom? Jasmine asked, her voice slightly raised now. She's playing the race card, Brenda muttered to Gregory, just loudly enough for Jasmine and Samuel to hear. The comment hit Jasmine like a physical blow. She'd heard this dismissal countless times throughout her career. Any legitimate complaint about unequal treatment reduced to playing the race card. I need to use the bathroom, Jasmine stated again, her voice trembling slightly. I've been holding it for hours now through my connection from my previous flight. This is becoming a medical emergency. Return to your seat immediately, or I will radio ahead for security, Gregory stated firmly. Jasmine looked around desperately. Most passengers were studiously avoiding eye contact, though a young couple a few rows back. Jordan and Ashley Foster, according to their animated whispers, were watching with clear concern. A younger flight attendant, her name tag read Tiffany Rodriguez, was observing the scene with visible discomfort. Kyle Bennett had stopped pretending not to record and was now openly filming the interaction. When Gregory noticed, he stepped toward Kyle. So recording crew members is against airline policy. Actually, Kyle replied calmly, I checked your terms of service before boarding. There's no such policy prohibiting passengers from recording interactions in public areas of the aircraft, especially when they might involve civil rights violations. Gregory's face flushed red. He turned back to Jasmine, who was now visibly in distress, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Please, she said, her professional facade cracking under the strain of physical discomfort and public humiliation. I'm a surgeon. I just finished a 36-hour shift saving a child's life. I have a medical condition that makes holding urine for extended periods dangerous. I'm speaking at a conference in 3 hours. I am begging you to let me use the bathroom. Her voice had risen enough that nearly everyone in first class could hear, and several passengers from business class were peering forward to see what was happening. The humiliation of having to announce her medical needs publicly burned through Jasmine, but desperation had overtaken dignity. Brenda and Gregory exchanged glances, clearly realizing the situation was escalating beyond their control. Fine, Brenda snapped. Follow me. Relief flooded through Jasmine as she stood, legs shaking slightly from having held her bladder for so long. But her relief quickly turned to renewed humiliation when she realized Brenda was standing at the bathroom door, holding it partially open. I'll need to monitor you for safety reasons, Brenda stated. That's absolutely not necessary or appropriate, Jasmine protested. It's either this or wait until we land, Brenda replied coldly. With no choice, and in physical pain, Jasmine used the facilities with Brenda standing guard at the partially open door, robbing her of even this basic privacy. The humiliation was complete. When she returned to her seat, face burning with shame, she discovered something else. Her handbag had been moved, her presentation notes rearranged. Someone had clearly searched through her belongings while she was gone. That was the final straw. I need your full names and employee ID numbers, she said firmly to Gregory when he passed by her seat. Both yours and Brenda's. Are you threatening me? He asked, leaning down intimidatingly. I'm exercising my right as a passenger to know who's providing my service. Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Or would you prefer I get that information from your corporate office? The tension in the first-class cabin was palpable. Several passengers were now openly watching the confrontation between Jasmine and the flight attendants. Gregory's face had darkened to an alarming shade of red as he loomed over Jasmine's seat. Gregory Phillips, ID 45872, he finally spat out. And Brenda is Brenda Mitchell, ID 36941. Now, if you're quite finished disrupting this flight, my belongings were searched while I was in the restroom. Jasmine cut in her voice level, but firm. I'd like to know why. No one touched your things, Brenda interjected, appearing beside Gregory. Perhaps you're confused after your episode. Jasmine felt her professional composure beginning to crack. After 36 hours saving lives, after years of education and training, after fighting her way to the top of her field, she was being gaslighted about something she knew with absolute certainty. My presentation notes were rearranged. My bag was moved to the opposite side of my seat, she stated. Someone went through my belongings without my consent, and I want to know why. Ma'am, making false accusations against crew members is a serious federal offense. Gregory warned, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. I suggest you carefully consider your next words. Samuel Thompson shifted in his seat beside her. I saw Ms. Mitchell handling the lady's bag while she was escorted to the restroom, he stated clearly. I assumed she was moving it to make room for the beverage service, but there was no beverage service during that time. Gregory's gaze snapped to Samuel. Sir, this doesn't concern you. Actually, as a witness to potential misconduct, it very much concerns me, Samuel replied calmly. And as a member of the board of directors for the National Civil Liberties Coalition, I find this entire situation deeply troubling. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Gregory's face for the first time. He straightened up, adjusting his uniform jacket. We'll be landing in approximately 45 minutes. I suggest everyone remain in their seats for the duration of the flight. As he walked away, Jasmine felt the last of her patience evaporate. She'd spent her entire life being the bigger person, staying calm in the face of injustice, working twice as hard for half the recognition. But this being denied basic human dignity, having her privacy violated, being publicly humiliated, and then gaslighted about it, this was her breaking point. She took out her phone and began typing rapidly. What are you doing? Samuel asked quietly, documenting everything while it's fresh. Jasmine replied, and looking up the FAA passenger rights regulations. This can't be legal. As she researched, she discovered that the actions taken against her violated multiple airline policies and federal aviation regulations. Denying bathroom access, selectively searching a passenger's belongings without security concerns, and the thinly veiled discriminatory treatment all constituted violations that could trigger federal investigations. Kyle Bennett leaned across the aisle slightly. I have the whole thing recorded, he said in a low voice. Both interactions, including when they threatened you with security and when Brenda made that comment about the race card. Just say the word and the video is yours. Jasmine looked at him in surprise. Why would you help me? Kyle shrugged. My sister's black, married to my best friend from college. I've seen how differently she gets treated when they travel together versus when she travels alone. It's not right. From across the aisle, the young couple who had been watching earlier caught Jasmine's eye. The woman Ashley Jasmine had heard her called gave an encouraging nod. We saw everything too, she mouthed silently. Jasmine felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find Tiffany Rodriguez, the younger flight attendant, leaning down as if to adjust something at her seat. Check your left pocket, Tiffany whispered, almost inaudibly, before straightening and continuing down the aisle with the trash collection. Jasmine discreetly reached into her left jacket pocket and found a folded note that hadn't been there before. Opening it carefully in her lap, she read, Brenda and Greg have multiple complaints filed against them. HR buries them. Call 1-800-FAA-SAF and ask for Harold Washington. Mention flight number and code 42.11. It means passenger rights violation. Cabin audio video will confirm your story. Jasmine's hands trembled slightly as she carefully tucked the note into her phone case. She looked up to catch Tiffany's eye, giving an almost imperceptible nod of thanks. With renewed determination, Jasmine began composing emails. One to the airline's customer service department, one to her attorney, Claire Bennett, no relation to Kyle, and another to the FAA address listed on their passenger rights page. She attached her meticulously documented timeline of events, including names, ID numbers, specific quotes, and times. Her phone vibrated with a text from Dr. Abernathy, the conference organizer. "Just checking in. Ready for your keynote car, will meet you at airport." The message was a jarring reminder of the other world waiting for her. The world where she was Dr. Jasmine Washington, respected neurosurgeon and keynote speaker. Not a woman being humiliated and denied basic human dignity because of her skin color. All set. "See you soon," she texted back, knowing she was anything but ready. How could she focus on neurosurgical techniques when she'd just been subjected to such dehumanizing treatment? As she put her phone away, she noticed Gregory and Brenda in intense conversation at the front of the cabin, occasionally glancing in her direction. Their body language had changed. There was nervousness now, an edge of worry that hadn't been there before. Good, Jasmine thought. Let them worry. The seatbelt sign pinged on as the captain announced their descent into Atlanta. As if on cue, the cabin erupted with the sounds of phones being turned on, after flight mode, notifications pinging, calls being connected. Jasmine's phone vibrated almost immediately. An email from the FAA acknowledging receipt of her complaint and advising that due to the serious nature of the allegations, they were expediting review. They requested she remain available for contact once the plane landed. Another email arrived seconds later. This one from Claire Bennett. Stay calm. Say nothing more to flight crew. I've contacted airline headquarters and the FAA. Document everything. Do not accept any offers or apologies on plane. We'll discuss next steps when you land. The plane began its descent. The atmosphere in the cabin charged with unspoken tension. Jasmine stared out the window at the approaching lights of Atlanta, steeling herself for whatever came next. One thing was certain, she would not stay silent. Not this time. As the plane continued its descent into Atlanta, Jasmine noticed a subtle shift in the cabin dynamics. The flight attendants were now moving with an air of nervous energy. Tiffany Rodriguez passed by ostensibly collecting trash and slipped another note onto Jasmine's tray table. FAA called the plane. Captain knows. Don't accept any sudden apologies or offers. The note confirmed what Jasmine had begun to suspect. Her complaints had already set wheels in motion. She tucked the second note away, with the first noticing how Brenda was now avoiding eye contact entirely, while Gregory seemed to be making a point of being excessively polite to the black passengers in business class. Kyle Bennett leaned across the aisle again. I've uploaded the video to my private cloud storage, he said quietly. Just in case anyone gets any ideas about confiscating phones, I can send you the access link. Thank you, Jasmine replied, genuinely moved by this unexpected allyship. Why are you really helping me? Kyle's expression turned serious. 2 years ago, my company was sued for racial discrimination in hiring practices. I was the CEO and insisted we had a colorblind approach. He paused, looking uncomfortable. The lawsuit forced me to review actual data and interview results. The bias was there in black and white, no pun intended. It changed how I see the world. Now I notice things I was privileged enough to ignore before. Before Jasmine could respond, Samuel Thompson joined the conversation. Dr. Washington, I want you to have my card, he said, handing her a sleek business card with an embossed gold logo. I mentioned I'm on the board of the National Civil Liberties Coalition, but what I didn't mention is that I'm also on the board of directors for Horizon Airlines. Jasmine's eyes widened in surprise. You're on the airlines board? Samuel nodded gravely. I was traveling incognito to experience our service firsthand. What I've witnessed today is appalling and directly contradicts the inclusive culture we claim to promote. I'd like your permission to use my position to ensure this incident receives the attention it deserves at the highest levels of the company. The young couple from a few rows back, Jordan and Ashley Foster, had moved to the empty seats across from Jasmine during the beverage service and now joined the conversation. "We got everything on video too," Jordan said, his voice low but intense. "Ashley started recording after they denied you the first time. We fly this route every month for work, and we've never seen anyone treated like this." Ashley nodded in agreement. "We'd be happy to provide statements or testimony or whatever you need." This was blatant discrimination, and it was painful to watch. Jasmine felt a surge of emotion. After feeling so alone and humiliated, she was suddenly surrounded by people willing to stand up and speak the truth about what they had witnessed. It was both validating and overwhelming. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The initial email she'd sent to the FAA had been escalated to priority status. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Davis speaking," came the announcement over the intercom. "We're beginning our final approach into Atlanta. The local time is 4:45 p.m. and the temperature is 76 degrees. We'll be landing approximately 15 minutes ahead of schedule. All passengers are asked to remain seated upon arrival, as will be met at the gate by airline representatives who need to board before deplaning begins. Thank you for your cooperation." The shift in the captain's tone was subtle but unmistakable. A certain tension that hadn't been present in his earlier announcements. Jasmine exchanged knowing glances with Samuel. Things were happening behind the scenes. Looking around at the small group that had formed around her, Samuel, Kyle, Jordan, and Ashley Jasmine felt a wave of gratitude. These strangers had chosen to stand with her rather than look away. It reminded her of her father's words when she'd faced discrimination during her medical residency. The problem isn't just the people who are actively racist. It's all the good people who see it happening and say nothing. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you witnessed discrimination but weren't sure whether to speak up? Comment number 1, if you believe bystanders have a responsibility to intervene when they see injustice happening. Hit that like button if you've ever been the only person to stand up when others stayed silent, and subscribe to hear more stories of everyday heroes who refuse to look the other way. But what happens when the silent allies aren't enough? What happens when those in power finally get involved? Stay tuned to find out how high this airline incident would reach. As the plane descended through the clouds, Jasmine found herself reflecting on similar incidents throughout her life, being followed by security in department stores, being mistaken for support staff rather than the surgeon in charge, having patients request the real doctor when she entered their rooms. Each time she had maintained her composure, had stayed professional, had not made a scene. Each time she had swallowed the indignity and moved on. But not today. Today, something had changed. Perhaps it was exhaustion breaking down her usual defenses. Perhaps it was the accumulation of a lifetime of these moments finally reaching critical mass. Or perhaps it was simply that for once, she wasn't standing alone. Dr. Washington, it was Tiffany, the young flight attendant, making one final pass through the cabin before landing. "The captain would like to speak with you after we land." And she hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I want you to know I've already given a statement to our internal HR department about what I witnessed. What happened to you today was wrong." Before Jasmine could thank her, the cabin phone rang. Gregory answered it, his face growing increasingly pale as he listened. After hanging up, he whispered urgently to Brenda, whose expression shifted from confusion to alarm. The plane touched down smoothly on the runway, taxiing toward the gate with deliberate slowness. As they approached, Jasmine could see several official-looking vehicles with flashing lights positioned near their arrival gate. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Davis's voice came over the intercom again. "I've just been informed that we need all passengers to remain seated upon arrival. We have some airline officials who need to board the aircraft before anyone deplanes. We apologize for any inconvenience." The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed completely. The other passengers were now openly watching Jasmine and the flight attendants, picking up on the palpable tension. Whispers rippled through the rows as people speculated about what was happening. As the aircraft came to a complete stop at the gate, Jasmine's phone rang. The caller ID displayed Federal Aviation Administration. With steady hands, she answered the call. "This is Dr. Jasmine Washington." "Dar Washington, this is Harold Washington. No relation with the FAA Office of Civil Rights. I apologize for contacting you while you're still on the aircraft, but given the nature of your complaint, we're initiating an immediate investigation. Is it correct that you were denied lavatory access based on your race, while other passengers were permitted access? Yes, that's correct, Jasmine confirmed, aware that Gregory was watching her with undisguised apprehension. And your belongings were searched without consent while you were eventually permitted to use the lavatory. Yes, we've already contacted the airline and the flight deck. There will be representatives meeting the aircraft, including our FAA field officers. We would like to take your formal statement along with any witnesses who observed the incidents. Would that be acceptable to you? Yes, absolutely, Jasmine replied. Excellent. For now, please remain on the aircraft when it reaches the gate. Our representatives will board to speak with you and the crew members involved. As Jasmine ended the call, the cabin phone rang again. This time, Gregory's face went from pale to ashen as he listened. When he hung up, he approached Jasmine's seat with a completely different demeanor than before. "Dr. Washington," he began, his voice artificially pleasant. "The captain would like to extend his personal apologies for any misunderstanding that occurred during our flight. We value you as a platinum member of our frequent flyer program and would like to offer you complimentary upgrades on your next 3 flights." Jasmine met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, but I'll be discussing this matter with the representatives meeting our flight." Gregory's forced smile faltered. "Of course, again, we sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Samuel Thompson interjected firmly. "It was discrimination, plain and simple. And as a board member of this airline, I can assure you it will be addressed appropriately." Gregory's face lost what little color remained. Without another word, he retreated to the galley where Brenda was already in tears, being consoled by a visibly uncomfortable Tiffany. The cabin door opened and several individuals in suits boarded the aircraft. The lead person, a distinguished-looking woman in her 50s, approached Jasmine directly. "Dr. Washington, I'm Danielle Moore, Vice President of Customer Experience for Horizon Airlines. On behalf of the entire company, I want to personally apologize for what happened today. We would like to speak with you privately if you're willing." Behind her, 2 FAA officials and what appeared to be law enforcement officers were already speaking with the captain and flight attendants. Jasmine gathered her belongings, feeling the weight of every eye in the cabin on her. As she stood to follow Danielle Moore, something unexpected happened. A passenger from business class, a middle-aged white woman, began to clap. Then another passenger joined in. And another. Within seconds, nearly the entire cabin was applauding a spontaneous show of support that brought unexpected tears to Jasmine's eyes. These strangers had witnessed an injustice, and instead of looking away, they were acknowledging it. They were seeing her. As she walked toward the front of the aircraft, head held high, Jasmine knew that whatever happened next, something important had already changed. The silence that typically surrounded these everyday indignities had been broken. And in that break, there was power. The moment Jasmine stepped off the plane into the jet bridge, she realized this had escalated far beyond a typical customer complaint. Waiting in the narrow corridor were not only Danielle Moore and the FAA officials who had boarded the plane, but also a collection of airline executives, airport security personnel, and 2 police officers. "Doctor," Washington said, a tall black man in a crisp FAA uniform stepping forward. "I'm Harold Washington from the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Civil Rights. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention so promptly." Harold's presence was commanding, his salt and pepper hair and the deep lines around his eyes speaking to decades of experience. He gestured to a petite woman beside him. "This is my colleague, Special Agent Kimberly Chen, who will be leading the formal investigation." Kimberly nodded professionally. "We'd like to take your statement in a private room, if that's acceptable. We understand you have a conference commitment, so we'll try to be expeditious." Jasmine glanced at her watch. She still had about 2 hours before her keynote address. That would be fine, she agreed. To her surprise, Samuel Thompson stepped up beside her. "I'll be accompanying Dr. Washington as both a witness and in my capacity as a board member," he stated firmly. Kyle Bennett emerged next. I have video documentation of the incidents, he offered, holding up his phone. Jordan and Ashley Foster followed. We have additional footage and are willing to provide statements, Jordan added. The airline executives exchanged alarmed glances as the impromptu procession of witnesses formed behind Jasmine. Danielle Moore's professional smile faltered momentarily. Perhaps we should move this discussion to our executive lounge, she suggested, her voice tight despite her attempt at cordiality. As they moved through the terminal, Jasmine noticed several passengers from the flight had gathered their phones, clearly recording the proceedings. News traveled fast, and in the digital age, injustice caught on camera traveled even faster. The group was escorted to a private suite in the airline's executive lounge, far from the curious eyes of other travelers. Once inside, Harold Washington wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. Dr. Washington, I've been with the FAA for 30 years, focusing on passenger rights for the last 15, he began. What you experienced today represents a clear violation of federal aviation regulations, specifically those pertaining to discriminatory treatment of passengers and arbitrary denial of lavatory access, which falls under both safety and civil rights jurisdictions. Kimberly Chin opened her laptop. We've already begun gathering evidence. The aircraft's internal audio recording system has been secured, and we've requested the complete passenger manifest along with crew assignment histories. Jasmine hadn't realized commercial flights recorded cabin audio. You record what happens in the cabin, she asked. Not all airlines do, but Horizon installed audio monitoring systems last year after several incidents of passenger misconduct, Harold explained. The recordings are typically only accessed in the event of reported incidents or emergencies. From across the table, Danielle Moore leaned forward. Dr. Washington, before we proceed further, I want to express Horizon Airlines' deepest regrets regarding your experience today. We would like to offer immediate compensation in the form of flight vouchers and our sincere assurance that the employees involved will be appropriately disciplined. Samuel Thompson cleared his throat. Danielle, I believe we're well beyond vouchers at this point. The FAA has initiated a formal investigation, and as a board member, I'm gravely concerned about what appears to be a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. Pat and Jasmine and Danielle asked simultaneously. Harold Washington nodded grimly. We've received 3 similar complaints about discriminatory lavatory access on Horizon flights in the past 6 months. All involved the same flight attendant, Brenda Mitchell. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just about her. Furthermore, Kimberly added, our preliminary check shows that Gregory Phillips was transferred from Meridian Airways last year following multiple passenger complaints, though the specific nature of those complaints was not disclosed in his transfer paperwork. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. What had seemed like an isolated incident of discrimination was rapidly revealing itself to be something more systemic and potentially more sinister. Danielle Moore's professional facade cracked slightly. I was not aware of these previous incidents, she said, shooting a concerned glance at her colleagues. This is deeply troubling. It should be, Samuel Thompson interjected firmly. As a board member, I find it disturbing that I'm learning about this pattern from the FAA rather than our own internal compliance reports. At that moment, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dr. Abernathy at the conference. Excuse me, I need to take this, she said, stepping away from the table. Jasmine, where are you? Dr. Abernathy sounded concerned. The pre-keynote reception starts in 45 minutes. I'm still at the airport, Jasmine explained. There's been an incident on my flight. I'm currently with FAA officials and airline executives. There was a pause on the other end. Is everything all right? Should we reschedule your keynote? Jasmine considered the question. Part of her wanted nothing more than to put this whole ordeal behind her and focus on her professional responsibilities. But another part, the part that had been silenced too many times before, knew that what was happening here was important. Can we push it back by an hour? She asked. Of course, Dr. Abernathy replied immediately. Just get here when you can. And Jasmine, whatever happened, we've got your back. As she returned to the table, Harold Washington was explaining the next steps in the investigation process. We'll need formal statements from all witnesses, he was saying, "and we'll be reviewing the cabin recordings immediately." One of the airline executives, a nervous looking man in an ill-fitting suit, raised his hand slightly. "About those recordings, there may be a technical issue with retrieving them." Harold fixed him with a steely gaze. "Mr. Peterson interfering with an FAA investigation is a federal offence. I suggest you ensure those technical issues are resolved immediately." The executive wilted under Harold's stare. Suddenly, the door to the conference room opened and Captain Lawrence Davis entered, still in his uniform. He nodded respectfully to the room before addressing Jasmine directly. "Dr. Washington, I want to personally apologize for what occurred on my aircraft today. As captain, I'm responsible for everything that happens on that plane, and I failed you." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "While we were still in the air, I received a call from our corporate headquarters about your FAA complaint," he continued. "I immediately reviewed the situation and spoke with several passengers who corroborated your account. I've already provided my statement to the FAA, and I want you to know that this type of behavior does not represent our airline or our values." Jasmine appreciated the captain's forthright approach. "Thank you, Captain Davis." Harold Washington nodded approvingly at the captain before turning back to the airline executives. "We'll need immediate access to the personnel files of both flight attendants as well as any previous passenger complaints involving them." Danielle Moore hesitated. "That would typically require a formal." "We can have the formal paperwork to you within the hour," Kimberly Chin interrupted smoothly. "Or we can begin the process of suspending Horizon's operating certificate pending investigation. Your choice." The threat of grounding the entire airline's fleet was not subtle, and Danielle quickly acquiesced. "Of course, we'll provide everything you need." As the discussion continued, Jasmine became aware of a growing commotion outside the conference room. Through the frosted glass door, she could see shadowy figures gathering. One of the airport security personnel stepped out to investigate and returned looking concerned. There are media representatives outside. Apparently, someone on the flight posted video of the incident on social media, and it's already gaining traction. Jasmine's stomach dropped. While she wanted accountability, she hadn't anticipated becoming the center of a viral news story, especially not hours before delivering a keynote address at a prestigious medical conference. Harold Washington turned to her with compassion in his eyes. "Dr. Washington, I understand this is overwhelming. You have every right to pursue this matter, but you also have the right to privacy. How would you like to proceed?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Claire Bennett, her attorney. "Video of incident going viral. 50K views in 20 minutes. CNN and local affiliates picked it up. Call me ASAP." Jasmine took a deep breath, centering herself. Throughout her career, she had navigated difficult situations by focusing on what was within her control and letting go of what wasn't. This situation was rapidly spinning beyond her control, but her response to it wasn't. "I need to make a call," she said, stepping away from the table once more. She dialed Claire's number. "Jasmine," Claire answered immediately. "I've seen the video. It's unambiguous. The airline is going to try to settle this quickly and quietly." "They already tried," Jasmine confirmed. "Flight vouchers and vague promises about appropriate discipline for the employees. Decline any offers," Claire advised firmly. "What happened to you is part of a pattern, and settling privately won't create the systemic change needed to prevent it from happening to someone else." Jasmine thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet, all the indignities she'd swallowed to avoid being labeled difficult or angry. She thought about her parents who had taught her to pick her battles carefully because the world wasn't fair. And she thought about the young black girls who might one day follow in her footsteps, who deserved better than what she had experienced. "I agree," she said, finally. "No private settlement." When she returned to the table, her decision was made. "I have a keynote address to deliver at the National Neurosurgical Conference in Shecht-Watch about 90 minutes. I need to leave shortly, but I want to be clear. What happened today was wrong, and it wasn't an isolated incident. I'm willing to participate fully in the investigation, but I'm not interested in a quick settlement that sweeps this under the rug." Harold Washington nodded approvingly. We'll continue our investigation regardless, Dr. Washington, but having your cooperation will make it significantly more effective. As the meeting concluded, arrangements were made for Jasmine to provide her formal statement the following day. As she gathered her belongings, Captain Davis approached her again. "Dar Washington, I've arranged for a private airport shuttle to take you directly to your conference. It's the least I can do." "Thank you, Captain," she replied, genuinely appreciative of his effort to make amends. As she left the conference room flanked by Harold Washington and Samuel Thompson, she was momentarily startled by the flash of cameras and the shouted questions from reporters who had somehow gained access to the secure area. "Dr. Washington, can you tell us what happened on the flight? Is it true you were denied bathroom access because of your race? Will you be filing a lawsuit against Horizon Airlines?" Harold Washington stepped forward protectively. "Dr. Washington has no comment at this time. The FAA is conducting a thorough investigation into this matter, and we ask that you respect her privacy." As they navigated through the media scrum toward the waiting shuttle, Jasmine maintained her composure, her head held high. This wasn't how she had envisioned starting her conference, but perhaps it was fitting. Her keynote was about breakthrough approaches to seemingly insurmountable medical challenges. And what was discrimination, if not a societal disease in need of innovative treatment? The private shuttle sped through Atlanta traffic, its police escort clearing a path that would have normally taken 45 minutes in just 15. Jasmine sat in the back seat, attempting to shift her focus from the airline incident to her upcoming keynote address. It proved nearly impossible. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since she'd left the airport. Texts from colleagues who had seen the viral video. Calls from her parents who had been contacted by reporters. Emails from the hospital administration expressing support but also concern about the media attention. And most recently, a message from the conference organizers offering to reschedule her keynote if she needed time to deal with the situation. The shuttle pulled up to the grand entrance of the Atlanta Medical Convention Center where Dr. Abernathy was waiting. His face usually composed, and academic showed clear concern. "Jasmine," he said, opening the door for her. "Are you all right?" "The video is everywhere. I'm fine," she replied automatically, though it wasn't entirely true. She was operating on adrenaline and determination, pushing aside the emotional aftermath that would surely come later. "I'd like to proceed with the keynote as planned." Dr. Abernathy studied her face for a moment before nodding. "The schedule has been adjusted. You're now the closing speaker, which gives you about 2 hours to prepare. We've arranged a private room where you can collect your thoughts." As they walked through the convention center, Jasmine became acutely aware of the stares and whispers. Hundreds of the nation's top neurosurgeons were gathered for the conference, and it seemed all of them had seen the video. Dr. Washington Jasmine turned to see Dr. Maya Patterson, one of the few other black female neurosurgeons in the country, approaching with fierce determination. "I saw what happened," Maya said, embracing Jasmine tightly. "The Black Medical Association is issuing a statement of support. We've got your back." Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she managed. "There's more," Maya continued, lowering her voice. "I've experienced similar treatment on Horizon flights twice in the past year. I never reported it because I didn't think anything would come of it, but after seeing your video," she paused. "You're not alone in this, Jasmine." The knowledge that other accomplished black physicians had faced the same discrimination was both validating and deeply troubling. This wasn't about one bad flight attendant or one bad day. It was systemic. In the private preparation room, Jasmine finally had a moment alone. She sank into a chair, allowing herself a brief moment of vulnerability before steeling herself again. Her phone rang. Claire Bennett, her attorney. "Jasmine, I'm at the airport with the FAA officials," Claire said without preamble. "The situation has escalated significantly. The cabin recordings confirm everything, and there's more. They found text messages between Gregory and Brenda discussing what they called passenger management techniques for certain types of travelers. They were explicitly targeting black passengers." Jasmine asked, though she already knew the answer. "And Middle Eastern and Hispanic passengers." "Yes," Claire confirmed. The FAA is expanding their investigation to all flights these attendants worked over the past year. Harold Washington says it's one of the most blatant cases of discrimination he's seen in his 30 years with the agency. Jasmine closed her eyes, processing this information. What she'd experienced wasn't random or isolated. It was deliberate, coordinated discrimination. "There's more?" Claire continued. The young flight attendant, Tiffany Rodriguez, has provided a detailed statement about witnessing similar incidents on at least a dozen flights. She claimed she reported concerns to management multiple times, but was told to focus on her own duties and that passenger relations were being handled appropriately. The airline knew. Jasmine felt a fresh wave of anger. It appears at least some mid-level managers were aware of complaints, Claire said carefully. The extent of knowledge at the executive level is still being determined. But Jasmine, there's something else you should know. The media coverage has exploded. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're all running the story. And Let J Jasmine P is trending nationwide. Jasmine winced at the hashtag. It captured the humiliating essence of what had happened, but it felt reductive of the broader systemic issues at play. "Samuel Thompson is giving a press conference as we speak," Claire added. "He's announced an emergency board meeting and the immediate suspension of both flight attendants pending investigation." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Dar Abernathy peeked in. "Sorry to intrude, but there's someone here insisting on speaking with you. A Mr. Kyle Bennett." Jasmine was surprised. "I'll call you back, Claire," she said. Ending the call, "You can send him in." Kyle entered, looking somewhat out of place among the medical professionals in his Silicon Valley casual attire. "Dr. Washington, I apologize for tracking you down like this, but I wanted to speak with you before my company makes an announcement." "Your company?" Jasmine questioned. "I'm the CEO of Spotlight Technologies," Kyle explained. "We develop AI software for identifying patterns in large data sets. After what I witnessed today, I've directed our team to create a new application, a platform for reporting and tracking incidents of discrimination in transportation and public accommodations." He handed her a tablet showing a prototype interface. "We're calling it Witness. It would allow passengers to document and report incidents in real time, creating a searchable database that could identify patterns across airlines, hotels, and other services. We'd like to offer you a role as an advisor if you're interested." Jasmine studied the prototype, immediately recognizing its potential value. "This could help quantify what many of us have experienced anecdotally for years." "Exactly." Kyle agreed. "Numbers are harder to dismiss than individual stories, unfortunately." Before she could respond further, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Horizon Airlines stock plummet 17% following viral discrimination video. Emergency board meeting called. The real-world consequences of what had begun as a denied bathroom request were expanding far beyond anything she could have anticipated. Part of her felt overwhelmed by the attention and the responsibility it entailed. Another part recognized the rare opportunity to create meaningful change. Her phone rang again, this time her mother. "Jasmine Elizabeth Washington." Her mother said, her voice a mixture of concern and pride. "Are you all right, baby? I'm okay, Mom." Jasmine assured her, though her voice wavered slightly. "Your father and I saw the video. That woman had no right to treat you that way." There was a pause. "Your grandfather would be proud of you for standing up. You remember what he always said about dignity." Jasmine smiled, despite herself. "They can take away convenience. They can take away comfort. But only you can surrender your dignity." "That's right," her mother affirmed. "Now I know you've got that big speech to give. You go show them why Dr. Jasmine Washington is a force to be reckoned with. We'll talk more tonight." As Jasmine ended the call, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had happened on that plane was not just about her, or even just about race. It was about human dignity and the responsibility of institutions to protect it. With 45 minutes until her keynote, she opened her presentation notes. Her talk on innovative approaches to pediatric neurosurgery remained important. Lives depended on the medical advances she was sharing. But now she felt compelled to acknowledge what had happened and connect it to the broader context of her work. She began revising her introduction, finding unexpected parallels between navigating systemic barriers in medicine and in society. Both required precise diagnosis, innovative intervention, and persistent follow-up to ensure lasting change. As she worked, another knock came at her door. This time, it was Danielle Moore, the airline's VP of Customer Experience, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Dr. Washington," she began tentatively, "I've just come from an emergency executive session. Our CEO, Jackson Williams, would like to speak with you personally after your address. We understand now that what happened goes beyond a simple customer service failure. The board has authorized me to inform you that both employees have been terminated, effective immediately." Jasmine regarded her coolly. "Ms. Moore, while I appreciate the airline taking action, I'm concerned that firing 2 employees doesn't address the systemic issues that allowed their behavior to continue despite multiple reported incidents." Danielle shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Williams agrees. That's part of what he'd like to discuss with you. The board is considering a comprehensive overhaul of our training and reporting systems, and they would value your input." "I'll consider speaking with him," Jasmine replied, "but right now I have a keynote to deliver." As Danielle left, Jasmine returned to her notes, refining her message with new clarity and purpose. By the time Dr. Abernathy came to escort her to the main stage, she was ready not just to share her medical expertise, but to connect it to the larger issues of dignity equality and systemic change. Walking onto the stage to thunderous applause from her colleagues, Jasmine took a deep breath. The events of the day had thrust her into an unexpected spotlight. But perhaps this was where she needed to be. As she launched into her address, connecting her groundbreaking surgical techniques to the broader context of breaking through barriers, she realized that this moment standing in her professional power, while acknowledging the struggle that had preceded it, was exactly what was needed. The physician's oath began with, "First, do no harm." But perhaps Jasmine thought, as she addressed the rapt audience, it was time to expand that principle. First, do no harm. Then prevent harm wherever possible, and finally heal the harm that has already been done, whether in the human brain or in human systems. By the time Jasmine concluded her keynote address, which had received a standing ovation from the entire medical conference, the story had transcended medical circles and exploded into the national consciousness. As she stepped off the stage, Dr. Abernathy handed her a tablet with a newsfeed open. "You might want to see this," he said gently. The screen showed a split view of major news networks all running the same story with variations of the same headline. "Renowned neurosurgeons subjected to racial discrimination on Horizon Airlines." The video Kyle had taken had been viewed over 5 million times in just a few hours. The Meilleur Let Jasmine in P was trending at #1 nationwide, with Danger Boycott Horizon and Jern flying, while Black close behind. This as Jasmine trailed off, unable to find the right word. Overwhelming Dr. Abernathy supplied unprecedented long overdue. All of the above, she admitted. Her phone had dozens of missed calls and hundreds of text messages. Colleagues, friends, family, and an alarming number from unknown numbers. Some of the message previews were supportive. Others contained slurs and threats that made her stomach clench. Claire Bennett was calling again. Jasmine answered immediately. "Jasmine, where are you right now?" Claire asked, her voice tense. "Still at the conference center. I just finished my keynote." "Stay there, don't leave without security," Claire instructed. "The video has gone viral in the worst way. You're getting support, but there's also a significant backlash. Some people are claiming you're exaggerating or that you're an angry black woman causing trouble." Jasmine felt a familiar weariness. No matter how accomplished, how measured her response, how legitimate her grievance, there would always be those who reduced her to a stereotype. "We've received several credible threats," Claire continued. "I've arranged for private security to escort you to your hotel, and the hotel has been notified to enhance their security protocols." "This is absurd," Jasmine said, the full weight of the situation finally hitting her. "All I did was ask to use the bathroom like everyone else on that plane." "I know," Claire said softly. "But you've inadvertently pulled back the curtain on something much bigger," Samuel Thompson called. The airline's internal investigation has already uncovered dozens of similar complaints that were buried or dismissed. The FAA investigation is expanding to include potential civil rights violations across multiple carriers. Harold Washington says this could be the biggest discrimination case in commercial aviation since the 1960s. Jasmine sank into a chair trying to process this information. I have surgery scheduled next week. Patients who need me. I can't become the face of a movement right now. I understand, Claire assured her. But for the immediate future, we need to focus on your safety and managing this situation. The hospital has been contacted by reporters. They're fully supportive and have arranged for coverage of your surgeries if needed. A knock at the door revealed Dr. Patterson with two large men in suits. The security CLA had arranged. Your escort is here, Maya said. And Jasmine. The Black Medical Association has called an emergency meeting. We've documented hundreds of similar experiences among our members. This isn't just about you or one airline. It's about a pattern that's been ignored for too long. As Jasmine gathered her belongings, her phone pinged with an email notification from Horizon Airlines CEO Jackson Williams requesting an urgent meeting that evening. Another notification showed that Horizon's stock had fallen 23% by market, close representing billions in lost value in a single day. The security team escorted Jasmine through a service entrance to avoid the media gathered at the main doors. As they drove to her hotel, she scrolled through her notifications, trying to make sense of how quickly everything had escalated. A text from Kyle Bennett caught her attention. Fox News is running with a story that you're a professional victim with a history of complaints. It's completely fabricated. My legal team is already sending cease and desist letters, and we're tracking the source of these false claims. The knot in Jasmine's stomach tightened. The same playbook was always used against those who spoke up. Discredit, dismiss, dehumanize. At the hotel, the manager personally escorted her to her room, which had been moved to a secure floor requiring special keycard access. We've implemented our VIP security protocol. Dr. Washington, he assured her, no one will bother you here. Alone in her room at last, Jasmine kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the bed, physically and emotionally drained. She opened her laptop to check her email and was immediately bombarded with notifications from social media accounts she rarely used. Thousands of messages, some sharing similar experiences, others offering support, many containing vile racist and sexist attacks. Among them was a message from a young black girl, no more than 12 years old, based on her profile picture. Dr. Washington, I want to be a doctor too. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to accept being treated like we don't matter. That single message cut through the noise, bringing tears to Jasmine's eyes. She remembered being that young girl, drawing inspiration and courage from the black women who had broken barriers before her. Her phone rang. Her father this time. Baby girl, he said, when she answered, his deep voice instantly comforting. Your mother and I have been watching the news. How are you really doing? Jasmine started to say. Fine automatically, then changed course. I'm overwhelmed, Dad. This was supposed to be about my keynote about the surgical technique that could save children's lives. Now it's turned into this circus. I know, he said gently. But sometimes the path we're meant to walk isn't the one we planned. Your medical work is important, vital even. But what's happening now? That's important too. What if they destroy my reputation? Jasmine asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since Claire mentioned the backlash. What if patients don't want the controversial doctor operating on their children? Jasmine Elizabeth, her father said firmly, using both her first and middle names as he had when she was a child needing redirection. You remember what happened when you were 9 years old at that swimming pool in Connecticut? Jasmine did remember. They had been the only black family at a private club where her father, also a physician, had been invited by colleagues. The pool manager had asked them to leave because another patron had complained, inventing a rule that guests could only visit once per month. You remember what I did? Her father pressed. You didn't argue, Jasmine recalled. You gathered our things calmly, took us home, then spent the next 6 months documenting every instance of discriminatory application of the rule. You found 15 cases where white guests visited multiple times in a month without issue. And then her father prompted, you presented the evidence to the club's board of directors and the local Human Rights Commission. The manager was fired and the club was required to implement non-discrimination training. That's right, her father confirmed. I didn't just get angry, I got strategic. That's what you need to do now. This isn't just about one bad day on a plane. It's about changing a system that has allowed this kind of treatment to continue unchecked. As they spoke, Jasmine's laptop pinged with an email notification. It was from Tiffany Rodriguez, the young flight attendant who had slipped her the notes. Dr. Washington, the email began. I want you to know that what happened today has inspired many of us to speak up. 23. Horizon flight attendants have now come forward with accounts of discriminatory practices they've witnessed or been instructed to implement. Gregory and Brenda were the worst offenders, but they were operating within a culture that tacitly permitted their behavior. We're organizing and documenting everything. If you're willing, we'd like to coordinate our efforts with yours. Her father, hearing the notification, asked, What's that? It's from one of the flight attendants, Jasmine explained, summarizing the email. It seems this is becoming a movement within the airline too. Good, her father said firmly. Change happens from both outside pressure and inside advocacy. Now, have you eaten anything since this morning? The question made Jasmine realized she was starving. No, actually, order room service, take a hot shower and get some rest, her father instructed. Tomorrow is going to be another long day. Your mother and I are flying in first thing in the morning. Dad, you don't have to. We want to, he interrupted gently. When you were fighting for your place in neurosurgery, you did it alone because that was your journey to walk. But this isn't just about you anymore, and you don't have to face it alone. After ending the call with her father, Jasmine ordered food and took his advice about the shower. As the hot water washed over her, she allowed herself to cry. Really cry for the first time since the incident. She cried from the humiliation, from the stress, from the unexpected weight of responsibility that had been thrust upon her. And then, as the tears subsided, she felt a strange sense of clarity emerging. This wasn't what she had planned, but perhaps it was where she needed to be. Her surgical innovations could save dozens of children each year. But addressing systemic discrimination in commercial aviation and perhaps beyond could impact thousands or even millions. As she stepped out of the shower, her phone was ringing again. This time, it was Harold Washington from the FAA. Dr. Washington. I apologize for calling so late, but there have been significant developments, he said when she answered. Our investigation has uncovered internal communications at Horizon, suggesting that certain discriminatory practices were not only known to management, but were informally incorporated into training for certain routes and cabin classes. What does that mean exactly? Jasmine asked, toweling her hair dry. It means this goes beyond a few problematic employees, Harold explained. The airline's leadership created conditions that enabled and even encouraged discriminatory treatment. The Department of Justice has now become involved, and there's talk of congressional hearings. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, stunned. Congressional hearings? Because I needed to use the bathroom. Because what happened to you appears to be the tip of a very large iceberg, Harold corrected gently. Sometimes it takes one clear, undeniable example to bring a systemic problem to light. Your case is particularly compelling because of your professional stature, the clear video evidence, and the number of witnesses willing to speak on record. After finishing her conversation with Harold, Jasmine checked her email one last time before bed. Among the hundreds of new messages was one from Jackson Williams, the airline CEO, sent just minutes earlier. Why Washington? In light of today's events and the ongoing investigations, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you experienced on our aircraft. What happened was inexcusable and reflects serious failures at multiple levels of our organization. Rather than offering compensation or making promises about internal changes, I would like to propose something different. The board has authorized me to invite you to help us address these issues in a meaningful way, not as a consultant or for PR purposes, but as an integral part of a comprehensive overhaul of our training policies and corporate culture. I understand if you're not interested in working with us after what you experienced, but I believe that real change requires input from those who have been harmed by the current system. Regardless of your decision, please know that we are committed to making this right, not just for you, but for all passengers who have experienced similar treatment. Respectfully, Jackson Williams. Jasmine read the email twice, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this a genuine desire for change or sophisticated damage control? Perhaps it was both. As she set her phone aside and turned off the lights, Jasmine found herself thinking about the surgical residents she mentored. She often told them that the most important skill in neurosurgery wasn't technical precision or medical knowledge, though both were essential. It was the ability to make clear decisions in complex, high-pressure situations where the path forward wasn't obvious and the stakes were life-altering. This situation, while entirely different from the operating room, required that same skill. Tomorrow, she would need to make decisions that could affect not just her own future, but potentially the experiences of countless travelers who would never know her name. With that weighty thought, Jasmine finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. The sounds of Atlanta traffic below her window and the ping of incoming messages on her silenced phone providing a strange urban lullaby. 2 weeks after what the media had dubbed the Horizon incident, Jasmine sat in a quiet anti-room in the Rayburn House Office building in Washington, D.C., reviewing her prepared testimony. In a few minutes, she would address the House Transportation Committee's emergency hearing on discrimination in commercial aviation. The past 14 days had been a whirlwind of activity that had transformed her life in ways she could never have anticipated. The viral video had spawned thousands of similar accounts across social media, creating a movement that extended far beyond Horizon Airlines or even the aviation industry. Samuel Thompson had resigned from Horizon's board to lead an independent investigation, declaring that he could no longer be part of an organization that had allowed such practices to become normalized. Tiffany Rodriguez had been promoted to a newly created position Director of Passenger Advocacy and Inclusion Training. Jasmine had taken a temporary leave of absence from her surgical practice, supported fully by the hospital administration. "Your patients will be here when you return," her department chair had assured her. "What you're doing now is a different kind of healing." Her parents had remained by her side throughout, providing the emotional support she needed as she navigated her unexpected new role as a civil rights advocate. Her father had become her unofficial strategist, drawing on his own experiences fighting discrimination in medical and social settings. Claire Bennett had assembled a formidable legal team that was now representing not just Jasmine, but a class of over 500 passengers who had experienced similar discrimination on various airlines. The FAA investigation had expanded to include all major US carriers, with preliminary findings suggesting that the issues extended far beyond Horizon. And Kyle Bennett had made good on his promise, fast-tracking the development of the Witness app, which had already been downloaded over 2 million times. Users could now document and report discriminatory treatment in real time, creating a searchable database that was making it increasingly difficult for companies to dismiss such incidents as isolated or anecdotal. "Dr. Washington." A congressional aide appeared at the door. "They're ready for you." Jasmine gathered her notes and smoothed her suit jacket. As she walked toward the hearing room, she thought about how different this was from her normal professional environment. The operating room was her domain, a place where her authority was rarely questioned, where her expertise commanded respect. Here she was stepping into unfamiliar territory, advocating not with surgical precision, but with the moral clarity of her lived experience. The hearing room was packed with legislators, media, airline representatives, and members of the public. As Jasmine took her seat at the witness table, she saw familiar faces in the audience. Her parents, Claire, Kyle, Samuel, Tiffany, and to her surprise, many of her medical colleagues who had flown in to show support. Congresswoman Elizabeth Hayes, one of the few black women on the committee, began the proceedings with a powerful opening statement. "Today, we address an issue that many Americans face daily, but that has rarely received the attention it deserves at the federal level," she declared. "What happened to Dr. Jasmine Washington, A distinguished neurosurgeon denied the basic dignity of bathroom access while white passengers were freely accommodated is not an isolated incident. It is emblematic of a broader pattern of discrimination that persists across our transportation systems and indeed throughout our society. As Jasmine listened, she recalled her conversation with Congresswoman Hayes the previous evening. Over dinner, Hayes had shared her own experience of being denied first-class boarding on a flight to Washington years earlier, despite her congressional credentials. They assumed I was in the wrong line, Hayes had explained. Even after I showed my boarding pass, the gate agent called a supervisor to verify it was legitimate. When it was Jasmine's turn to speak, she looked directly at the committee members, her voice steady and clear. I appear before you today, not only as the passenger from that viral video, but as one voice among thousands who have experienced similar treatment, she began. What happened to me on that flight was humiliating and dehumanizing. But the true injustice lies in the fact that such treatment has been normalized, rationalized, and systematized across the aviation industry and beyond. For the next 15 minutes, Jasmine detailed not only her own experience, but the broader patterns that had emerged from the thousands of accounts collected through the Witness app and the FAA investigation. She spoke of the psychological impact of such discrimination, the cumulative effect of repeatedly being treated as less deserving of basic dignity and respect. This isn't just about comfort or convenience, she emphasized. It's about whether our society truly believes in equal treatment under the law, or whether we're willing to accept a two-tiered system where some Americans must constantly prove their worthiness of basic dignity. As Jasmine concluded her testimony, the room fell silent. Then Congresswoman Hayes spoke again. Dr. Washington, thank you for your powerful testimony. Before we continue, I'd like to enter into the record that our committee has received over 5,000 similar accounts of discriminatory treatment in commercial aviation in the 2 weeks since your incident became public. I believe this underscores the systemic nature of the problem you've described. What followed was 3 hours of intense questioning from committee members. Some were supportive, pressing for immediate regulatory action. Others were skeptical, suggesting that individual bad actors, rather than systemic issues, were to blame. A few attempted to minimize the incident or question Jasmine's interpretation of events until Congressman James Wilkins played the unedited cabin recording that had been obtained through the FAA investigation. The recording captured not just the denial of bathroom access and the subsequent search of Jasmine's belongings, but also private comments between Gregory and Brenda that revealed their explicit racial bias. The room grew tense as Gregory's voice was heard clearly saying, "These people always want special treatment." By the time the hearing concluded, there was bipartisan agreement that federal action was needed. The committee chair announced that legislation would be drafted to strengthen anti-discrimination protections in commercial transportation and enhance oversight mechanisms. As Jasmine gathered her materials, Congresswoman Hayes approached her privately. "Your testimony today will change things," Hayes said quietly. "But I want you to be prepared. Change this fundamental never comes without resistance. The next few weeks will be challenging." Hayes was right. In the days following the hearing, Jasmine became the target of intense backlash from certain media outlets and online communities. Fox News ran segments questioning her motives and character. Anonymous accounts spread false claims about her medical practice. Death threats arrived at her home and hospital office. But for every attack, there were 10 expressions of support. Medical associations issued statements backing her. Former patients shared stories of her exceptional care. Fellow travelers recounted similar experiences and thanked her for speaking up. The hashtag #IStandWithDrWashington began trending alongside the original tweet, "Let Jasmine P3" weeks after the congressional hearing. Jasmine sat in a conference room at Horizon Airlines headquarters facing CEO Jackson Williams and the newly formed Passenger Dignity Task Force. After careful consideration and lengthy discussions with her parents, Claire and Samuel, she had accepted the airline's invitation to help reshape their policies and training, but on her terms. The changes we're discussing today cannot be cosmetic or performative, Jasmine stated firmly. They must be substantial, measurable, and sustainable. Jackson Williams nodded. We agree completely, Dr. Washington. That's why we've allocated $20 million for the initial implementation and have committed to independent auditing of our progress. The proposed changes were indeed substantial. Mandatory Antibius training for all customer F-facing staff. A new reporting system for passengers who experienced discrimination. Revision of security protocols to ensure they weren't being used as pretext for discriminatory treatment. Creation of an independent passenger advocacy office with real authority. And perhaps most significantly, a commitment to diversity at all levels of the organization, including senior leadership and the board of directors. Tiffany Rodriguez, in her new role, presented data gathered from flight attendants across the airline's network. What we found is that discriminatory practices weren't just permitted. In some cases, they were informally taught during training as passenger management techniques for difficult travelers, she explained. The culture needs to change from the ground up. Samuel Thompson, leading the independent investigation, had uncovered similarly troubling patterns. We found that complaints of discrimination were systematically downgraded in severity or reclassified as customer satisfaction issues rather than potential civil rights violations, he reported. This allowed the airline to report artificially low numbers of discrimination complaints to regulators. As the meeting progressed, Jasmine found herself drawing on skills she developed as a surgeon, the ability to diagnose complex problems, to collaborate with diverse teams, to remain focused on outcomes rather than intentions. The goal wasn't to punish or shame, but to heal a broken system. By the end of the day, they had outlined what would become known as the Washington Standards, a comprehensive framework for ensuring equitable treatment in commercial aviation that would eventually be adopted industry-wide. As Jasmine prepared to leave, Jackson Williams approached her. Dr. Washington, I want to thank you personally. He said, his usual corporate polish replaced by genuine sincerity. What happened to you on our aircraft was inexcusable. But your response choosing to drive systemic change rather than simply pursuing damages has been extraordinary. Jasmine considered his words carefully. Mr. Williams, I became a neurosurgeon because I wanted to heal people. This work addressing the systemic discrimination that affects millions of travelers is a different kind of healing. I'm simply doing what needs to be done. Back in her hotel room that evening, Jasmine video called her parents to update them on the day's developments. As she described the proposed changes and the airline's commitments, she noticed her father wiping away tears. Dad, what's wrong? He shook his head, smiling through his tears. Nothing's wrong, baby girl. I'm just proud. When I think about what your grandparents faced during the civil rights movement, the indignities they endured, the barriers they confronted, and now here you are transforming an entire industry because you refused to accept mistreatment. They would be so proud of you. Her mother nodded in agreement. You've always been healing people one at a time in the operating room. Now you're healing society in a different way. As she ended the call, Jasmine reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few weeks. She had stepped away from her surgical practice temporarily, but in doing so had found a new way to make a difference. The skills that made her an exceptional surgeon, precision persistence. The ability to remain calm under pressure and an unwavering commitment to positive outcomes were serving her well in this unexpected new role. That night, as she reviewed materials for the next day's meetings, Jasmine received an email from a young black woman named Imani Roberts, a medical student at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Washington. The email began. I've followed your story since the video first went viral. I want to thank you for standing up not just for yourself, but for all of us. I've experienced similar treatment so many times, but never had the courage or platform to challenge it. Watching you transform a moment of humiliation into a movement for change has inspired me beyond words. I'm in my second year of medical school considering neurosurgery as my specialty. Seeing you navigate both the medical world and this public advocacy role with such grace and determination shows me what's possible. Thank you for being the role model I needed. Attached to the email was a photo of Imani with a group of fellow black medical students all wearing pins that read "Future Dr. Washington." For the first time since the incident, Jasmine felt tears well up. This, the impact on the next generation, was perhaps the most meaningful outcome of all. By refusing to accept discrimination as simply the cost of existing in her own skin, she was helping to create a world where young women like Imani might face fewer such battles. As she prepared for bed, Jasmine thought about the brain surgery she'd pioneered, the lives she'd saved in the operating room. That work remained vitally important, and she would return to it soon. But this unexpected detour, this opportunity to address systemic injustice, was its own kind of life-saving work. The transformation wasn't just happening in airline policies or congressional hearings. It was happening within Jasmine herself. She was discovering new dimensions of her voice, her influence, and her purpose. The humiliation she'd experienced on that flight had catalyzed something powerful, not just in the systems she was now helping to reform, but in her own understanding of her capabilities and calling. As she drifted off to sleep, Jasmine found herself thinking of her grandfather's words about dignity. They had always been a source of strength and guidance, but now she was adding her own corollary. They can deny you convenience, comfort, or courtesy, but when you stand firm in your dignity, you create the possibility of change that extends far beyond yourself. 6 months after the incident that had transformed her from respected neurosurgeon to reluctant civil rights icon, Dr. Jasmine Washington stood at a podium in the training center of Horizon Airlines Atlanta headquarters. Behind her, a large banner displayed the now famous phrase, "The Washington Standards Ensuring Dignity and Equality in Commercial Aviation." The room was filled with airline executives, FAA officials, civil rights advocates, and media representatives gathered for the official launch of the industry's most comprehensive anti-discrimination initiative to date. Jasmine, dressed in a tailored navy suit that projected both authority and approachability, surveyed the audience with quiet confidence. 6 months ago, I boarded a Horizon Airlines flight as a passenger and medical professional headed to share life-saving surgical techniques with colleagues. She began, "I could never have imagined that being denied access to a bathroom would lead to this moment. But sometimes, the most significant changes begin with the most basic denials of dignity." The Washington Standards, as they had come to be known, were now being implemented across Horizon's entire operation and had been voluntarily adopted by 6 other major carriers. The comprehensive framework included mandatory Antibius training using evidence-based methods, clear, consistent protocols for lavatory access and passenger movement, transparent complaint processes with independent oversight, and perhaps most importantly, accountability mechanisms with real consequences for violations. What makes these standards different from previous attempts at addressing discrimination is that they were developed not as a public relations exercise, but as a genuine effort to transform airline culture from the inside out. Jasmine continued, "They were shaped by the experiences of passengers who have faced discrimination, the insights of crew members who have witnessed it, and the expertise of civil rights advocates who have fought against it for decades." In the front row, Jasmine could see Samuel Thompson, who had resigned from Horizon's board to lead an independent aviation equity foundation funded by a settlement with the airline. Beside him sat Tiffany Rodriguez, now the airline's Director of Passenger Advocacy and Training, who had been instrumental in implementing the new standards. Gregory Phillips and Brenda Mitchell, the flight attendants who had discriminated against Jasmine, had been terminated immediately after the incident. But the investigation had revealed something more troubling. Both had previously been transferred from other airlines following similar complaints. This passing the problem approach had allowed discriminatory behavior to continue unchecked across the industry. Today, we also announced the launch of the Aviation Equity Database. Jasmine explained a secure system that allows airlines to share information about substantiated discrimination complaints while protecting employee privacy. This will prevent the industry-wide practice of simply transferring problematic employees from one carrier to another. The database had been Kyle Bennett's contribution. After witnessing Jasmine's treatment on the flight, the tech CEO had dedicated significant resources from his company to developing technology solutions for tracking and addressing discrimination. His Witness app had now been downloaded over 5 million times and was being used to document discriminatory experiences across multiple industries. As Jasmine concluded her remarks, Harold Washington from the FAA stepped forward to announce that elements of the Washington standards would be incorporated into federal aviation regulations, making them mandatory for all U.S. carriers. What had begun as one passenger's humiliating experience had catalyzed industry-wide change. After the formal presentations as attendees mingled during a reception, Jasmine found a quiet moment with her parents who had supported her throughout the tumultuous 6 months. "I'm so proud of what you've accomplished," her father said, embracing her. "You didn't just fight for yourself. You created a framework that will protect countless travelers for years to come." Her mother squeezed her hand. "And you did it all while continuing your medical work. I don't know how you managed both." It hadn't been easy. After a 1-month leave of absence to testify before Congress and participate in the initial phases of developing the Washington standards, Jasmine had returned to her surgical practice. For 5 months, she had balanced her medical responsibilities with her advocacy work, often joining meetings remotely between surgeries or flying to Washington for hearings on her days off. The hospital had been supportive, recognizing that Jasmine's advocacy work enhanced rather than detracted from their mission. Her colleagues had stepped up to ensure patient care never suffered, and her department had even created a new position, Director of Equity, in healthcare, inspired by her work in aviation. Dr. Washington, a young flight attendant, approached tentatively. "I just wanted to thank you. I've been with Horizon for 2 years and I've seen things I didn't know how to address. The new training and reporting systems have changed everything. Crew members feel empowered to speak up now, and passengers are being treated with more consistency and respect." As the young woman walked away, Jackson Williams Horizon CEO approached. "The preliminary data is promising," he said without preamble. Passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment have decreased by 62% in the divisions where we've fully implemented the standards. Employee satisfaction scores are up across the board, and we're seeing unexpected operational benefits. More efficient boarding, fewer in-flight conflicts, improved communication between crew members. Jasmine nodded unsurprised. Treating people with dignity and consistency isn't just the right thing to do. It's good business. Williams smiled woefully. A lesson we learned the hard way. Our stock still hasn't fully recovered from the initial hit, but investors are coming back as they see the positive changes. I've been asked to present the standards to the International Air Transport Association next month. As the reception wound down, Jasmine checked her watch. She had a flight to catch, not a Horizon flight this time, but a competitor that had recently adopted the Washington standards. She was headed to Johns Hopkins to give a guest lecture to medical students, including Imani Roberts, the young woman who had written to her months earlier. At the airport, Jasmine noticed the subtle changes that had already been implemented. New signage clearly stating passenger rights, diverse staff at customer service positions, and a prominently displayed QR code for the Witness app at every gate. As she boarded her flight, the lead flight attendant recognized her immediately. "Dr. Washington, we're honored to have you aboard. I completed the new amphibious training program last week. It was truly eye-opening." Jasmine smiled and thanked her, then settled into her seat. As the plane taxied for takeoff, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. The humiliation she had experienced on that fateful flight had been transformed into a catalyst for change that extended far beyond her personal experience. The aircraft lifted off, and as Atlanta receded below, Jasmine gazed out the window. She thought about the brain surgeries she had performed in the past week. 3 children whose lives had been saved by the innovative techniques she had developed. That work remained her primary calling, her most direct way of healing the world. But this other work, addressing systemic injustice, creating frameworks for accountability and change, was healing of a different kind. It wouldn't save individual lives with the immediacy of neurosurgery, but it would improve countless lives over time by protecting basic human dignity. Her phone pinged with a message from Claire Bennett. "Turn on the news when you land." DOJ just announced a major civil rights investigation into discriminatory practices across all US airlines, citing the Washington standards as a benchmark for compliance. Jasmine smiled to herself. The work wasn't finished, it had only just begun. But a foundation had been laid for meaningful, lasting change. What had started with one woman being denied access to a bathroom had evolved into a movement that was transforming an entire industry's approach to equality and dignity. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Roberts speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude of 36,000 FT and the seatbelt sign has been turned off. You are now free to move about the cabin." There was a brief pause, and then the captain added something Jasmine had never heard before on a commercial flight. As a reminder, all passengers have equal access to lavatories when the seatbelt sign is off. Our crew is committed to ensuring every passenger is treated with dignity and respect throughout our journey together. Jasmine closed her eyes, a sense of profound accomplishment washing over her. The Washington standards weren't just policies on paper. They were already changing the lived experience of air travel for millions of people. When she opened her eyes, a flight attendant was approaching with a tablet in hand. "Dr. Washington, the captain, would like to invite you to visit the cockpit before we land. She's a huge admirer of your work, both your surgical innovations and the standards you've developed." "I'd be honored," Jasmine replied. As the flight continued smoothly toward its destination, Jasmine thought about the young medical students she would be addressing tomorrow, especially Imani Roberts and her classmates who have been inspired by her dual role as physician and advocate. She hoped they would understand that the most meaningful change often begins not with grand plans or lofty ambitions, but with a simple, unwavering commitment to dignity, both your own and others. The flight attendant returned with a note from the captain, Dr. Washington. "I wanted you to know that every member of this crew has completed Washington training. We're committed to upholding the standards you've established. Thank you for turning a moment of injustice into a movement for change. Captain Imani Roberts." Jasmine stared at the name in disbelief, then smiled. Imani Roberts, the medical student who had written to her, was not the captain of this aircraft. But the coincidence of names felt symbolic somehow, a reminder that change ripples outward in ways we can never fully anticipate. As the plane began its descent, Jasmine felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with humiliation had led to transformation not just of airline policies or industry standards, but of her own understanding of her purpose and power. When the plane touched down smoothly on the runway, the passengers erupted in the customary applause. But this time, as Jasmine joined in, she was applauding something beyond a safe landing. She was celebrating the incredible journey that happens when people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable, when they instead choose to transform their pain into progress, their indignity into institutional change. Has something similar ever happened to you or someone you know? Did you speak up or stay silent? Comment below with your experience. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more accounts of everyday heroes fighting for dignity and justice. Share this video to spread awareness about the Washington standards and how one person's refusal to accept discrimination led to industry-wide change. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable, and your courage can create change that extends far beyond yourself. Dr. Jasmine Washington's journey from discrimination victim to changemaker teaches us powerful lessons about dignity advocacy and systemic transformation. When faced with injustice, Jasmine didn't just accept it as an unfortunate reality. She documented it, spoke up, and channeled her humiliation into meaningful action. This story demonstrates how individual courage can spark collective change. By refusing to stay silent, Jasmine exposed discriminatory practices that had affected countless others who lacked her platform and resources. Her professional standing as a neurosurgeon initially made her discrimination more shocking to the public, but she leveraged this attention to highlight the experiences of all marginalized travelers. The Washington standards emerged not from vengeance or personal gain, but from a genuine desire to prevent others from experiencing similar treatment. Jasmine's approach, gathering evidence, building alliances, working within systems while demanding accountability, offers a blueprint for effective advocacy. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that speaking truth to power requires both courage and strategy. Jasmine combined her medical precision with her father's lessons about documenting discrimination and fighting smart. She maintained her dignity throughout, transforming personal humiliation into industry-wide improvements. When we witness injustice, we have three choices: remain silent, seek individual remedy, or pursue systemic change. Jasmine chose the hardest but most impactful path, creating lasting transformation that extended far beyond herself. Has something similar ever happened to you or someone you know? Did you speak up or stay silent? Comment below with your experience. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more accounts of everyday heroes fighting for dignity and justice. Share this video to spread awareness about the Washington standards and how one person's refusal to accept discrimination led to industry-wide change. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters, your dignity is non-negotiable, and your courage can create change that extends far beyond yourself.